Finger crossed.
Good morning, good afternoon, evening, everyone. Sorry for being late. We did have some technical issues, but everything is sorted now. So we are going to start this webinar. So thank you very much for being here. And if you do have any, questions that you would like to ask during the webinar, please feel free to use the question section. So first of all, let me just start to introduce myself and Mehdi, and then we're going to really start to discuss about one of the most important topic at the moment in the field of generative AI, which is RAG and fine tuning. So what we want to do with this session is to really bring a little bit more clarity to businesses, but also sole entrepreneurs that are thinking about adopting generative AI solutions, but they don't know exactly how personalized those solutions. Oh, no, Stefania is telling me that it's not working, right? So maybe you cannot see. Okay,
Sorry,
right.
Matt.
Okay, so before we start, so let me introduce Mehdi Chalak, and then I will introduce myself, and then I think we are ready to go. Mehdi, do you want to go and introduce yourself?
Thank you, Mathilde. Pleasure to be here. Let me quickly introduce myself indeed. I'm Mehdi Shalak. I'm an AI engineer specialized in LLM fine-tuning and RAG. I've been doing that for the past 6 years from France and recently moved to Dubai. And again, thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. And for those of you that don't know me, my name is Matilda D'Amelio. I'm the CEO and founder of Sophia Training and Consulting. And what we do is that we help organizations in the entire process of implementing generative AI solution. So from the preparation and assessment of the data to the implementation of the technical solution to the deployment of the solution and the ramping up and scaling of the technical solution, together with the support in the definition of the AI strategy, but also of a proper change management process. So I would say, without further ado, I would say let's start by really explaining and clarify what we meant when we talk about RAG and fine tuning, and why they are important things to know when businesses they are thinking about adopting generative AI solutions. Mehdi, please.
Sure thing. Well, first of all, what is RAG? RAG means retrieval augmented generation. To understand the concept simply, hopefully we all use ChatGPT or any chatbot whatsoever by now, right? And so if you go to ChatGPT, for example, and you start to ask a non-generic question, but mostly specific targeted question about your businesses, for example, whether it's about your employees, whether it's about your leads, your clients, your inventory. Well, that's where the limitation of the current LLM goes. They don't have, maybe yet, but they don't have, as of now, access to your private enterprise data. Sometimes they never will, right? There's specific sectors such as financial, healthcare, government that is obviously out of the way, out of the question to share those kind of sensitive data to an LLM and a chatbot. But mostly, if you go to ChatGPT right now and you ask it about your business because you want to extract insight, because you want to decipher something, because you want to connect different data sources, the problem is it won't know, right? Worst case, it will hallucinate an answer. Best case, it will simply tell you, I don't have access to those data. And what RAG is doing is simply creating a knowledge base with your own data, whether it's sensor data, whether it's database, whether it's your resume, and let the LLM and the chatbot have access to it, basically. Fine tuning, on the other hand, it's most useful along the way a bit later, mostly in context of a business and an enterprise to add specialized knowledge on top of the general knowledge most LLMs currently have. So for example, if I want an LLM in the medical sector and I want it to understand some of the protein structures, I want it to understand some of the specialized acronym that are key to my business. More often than not, I will greatly gain from fine tuning the model I use on my own data so it can quickly adapt to the best formats, to the best syntax, to the best vocabulary that is key to my business so I can personalize the knowledge and the answer I get even further. Obviously, there's other use cases, but time is not unlimited. So let's stay on that for that first question.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mehdi. And but so if you are a business and you want to personalize your model, so how you can understand, where should I use RAG? And when should I use fine tuning? But also, let me also add on this. Um, also because money and budget is always an important element to take into account from a business perspective. So when you choose between these two solutions, what are the elements that you need to take into account in terms of applications, but also in terms of budget, which is needed?
Yes, that is a great question because those are usually put on the same basket and people confuse them a lot. If we had a scale in terms of simplicity to difficulty, we can take the simplest approach, which is just taking any API, right? So I can call ChatGPT, I can call Cloud directly in my application, which is sometimes sufficient for a lot of basic generalist application. Then maybe I have a specific need for confidentiality. And so what we do in this case is that you take an open source LLM, right? Just like a program that you run on your own computer instead of a SaaS or server. You can take your open source model privately on your server and ensure data privacy and stay everything hermetic, right? Beyond the API versus open source approach, you can then fine tune a model. Again, you cannot really fine tune public APIs. It doesn't work, right? OpenAI lets the possibility to fine tune previous GPT model. I don't even think it's possible now. It was more of a marketing gimmick. It doesn't really work. So sometimes when I take my open source model, because I need privacy, confidentiality, I need to be able to scale the way I want. It's not enough. It's not sufficient. DeepSeek, for example, which is the most famous one these days, right? These hours even. They are open source, so you can both call the API if you want, but you can also just download the weights and run it privately in your server. But then maybe it's not the best compared to ChatGPT. Maybe it lacks in some areas, whether it's based on your topic in general, and you want to find that's where you want to fine tune, but you already implemented open source stack and you're a little bit advanced in your reflection, right? You never start right away and fine tune a model. And finally, and at last, people also confuse a lot fine tuning a model versus training a model from scratch, right? Training a model from scratch is going to be millions of dollars. There is no way in hell you want to do that unless you are in research, in academics, and or you're trying to be a competitor for the Claude and Anthropic and OpenAI of the world, right? Most of the time, you're going to want to fine tune, and fine tune depending on the size of the model. It can be done on a laptop for a few days, and you can already gather great results. So I feel it's an important difference to make also because most of the clients are really sometimes afraid. They don't even go and try to implement GenAI stack because they think, oh, if we want to do anything, we need fine tuning, and fine tuning is going to be very, very expensive. Both of those statements are incorrect.
Thank you very much, Mehdi. And then, so my question then it would be, so RAG obviously is the most suitable solution at the moment for organizations. But when it comes to, adopting generative AI solution, hallucination is always one of the biggest source of concern. So I was just wondering if you can bring a little bit more clarity and more specifically, like explain what is the impact that RAG can have in mitigating, not canceling, but really mitigating the hallucinations? And also if you can give us some sort of benchmark so people, they have some numbers in mind to really understand what is the in numbers, the impact that RAG can have on hallucination reduction.
Well, I don't know about numbers, to be honest, because by definition, hallucination cannot be easily quantified, right? It really depends on your use case. There is no generalities. Let me be, for example, if you want I mean, I don't know what kind of business that would be, but if you want a chatbot, if you want to sell poems, for example, you almost want it to hallucinate, right? You want to, to put the inventivity, the creativity to the maximum. On the other end of the spectrum, you have all the financial, healthcare sectors where even a 99% accuracy isn't enough, right? It's in some sectors it's 100% or nothing. And a good thing that RAG brings to the table is explainability mostly,
Mm,
because there is advanced techniques like graph rag, for example, but even basic rag, if implemented correctly, you should be able to have embedded in this system a citation system, which
mm,
basically means that, okay, I'm using RAG because I'm using private data, right? I want my HR people to be able to type the profile they are searching for and go through thousands and thousands of profiles in our CV database and just pop up the one that are relevant to the natural semantic query the HR person typed. With this results, you'll be able to have, we are getting this answer based on this resume and this resume, and we are saying this profile is good because it did Stanford or because it mentioned being certified for cloud or whatever. When it mentioned the piece of document it's basing its answer from, you as a human being are able to go and look at the document and say, okay,
mm.
this is indeed correct, right? The information you fetch from the document are correct, or no, this is incorrect. I have a few examples, but mainly RAG is crucial. Even some people, let's say, that want that's a good example actually, because I have a client right now, I have a project. I cannot go into the details and the specifics, but we are implementing RAG on knowledge that is publicly available. So we could go without a private knowledge base, but we are still implementing it because thus we can tell the chatbot, base yourself only on these trusted sources and nothing else. And we can also, every time we give an answer, it's a look at document one, look at document three. That's where we based our answer from. And so right now, there's two things. We reduce hallucination greatly because now the LLM doesn't have to put it out of his hat and his billions and billions of rows of training data. It has to pull it from your knowledge base, which is going to be infinitely smaller than the whole internet. And you can also pinpoint which documents was the answer generated from, basically. So already, I don't have any numbers out of my hat, but if you go to 20, 30% hallucination, maybe you can go to, let's say, 10%, 5%, 0%. Sometimes I mean, uh, there's some really simple use case. Sometimes I can scale really well. LLMs are very, very performant right now, right? We call the 2024 the year of the explosion of intelligence for the different models. And even this last 1% for the very specific industries that have high stakes that I mentioned before, they have this explainability right away. And so suddenly you go from, I cannot implement this in production, it's just a dream, right? It's just a concept, to, okay, it runs. I've implemented financial RAG or healthcare RAG that are in production and work right now, and we still are able to sleep without any nightmares.
Yeah, thank you, Medin. I think what you mentioned is very important because there is a lot of confusion, I guess, into the market in terms of, okay, what are the benefits of RAG? And if also can, pinpoint the main elements that you mentioned is that any time that RAG is positioned as the perfect solution for reducing hallucination, well, that's really not really the right way to really position it. So if you're a business and you're thinking about really using generative AI, and someone is really mentioning that the RAG is going to be the solution for solving any hallucination problem, that's really not correct, not appropriate. But as Mehdi was mentioning, it's more the interpretability part. It's really about increasing interpretability and really better understanding, where the information came from. This is an excellent, way for you to bring more transparent as well in the application of generative AI solution, but also build trust among the adopters of the generative AI solution. I also wanted to mention something, and this is the follow-up question for you, Mehdi. You briefly mentioned it already, but there is a new technique which is getting more and more traction into the market, which is graph RAG. And I know that this is also your area of specialty, so I was wondering if you can really explain to us what graph RAG is, how it is different from a traditional RAG, and what are the benefits really of using graph RAG solutions?
Yes. Um, of course, I usually have, it's a good exercise for me because usually I rest myself on visualization, right? One good thing about GraphRag is that it is very visual and it is very easy to understand. Well, it's easier to understand it thanks to the visualization. Without it, let me tell you something. For example, we need to understand the difference, put it simply, between RAG and GraphRag. A RAG pipeline is basically I take all my texts, I chunk them into paragraphs, for example, and then I try to retrieve every relevant paragraph from my query. I check between the two and see the similarities, and I take all the chunks that are similar to my queries and I insert them, right? Just like when we want to finish our suitcase before the vacation, I'm like, okay, get in there, get inside the context, let's cram as much as possible, and then we go along. And that is one of the main source of hallucination for LLMs, right? It's the context
Mm,
window. Because just like humans, you need to think about, metaphorically of course, but you need to think about the context window as the short-term memory of the LLM. Everything, even the history of the different conversation in ChatGPT, for example, is not some kind of magic memory. It's just that all the previous message, every time we send a new message, we send all the previous message before it. And we say, okay, we said all that, now we say that, tell me more, right? And at some point, it's going to forget. And the more this short-term memory is full, the more you're gonna hallucinate. Basically, just like a human being, for example, again, if I give you three numbers to remember, it's gonna be a lot easier than if I give you 12, right? And I say, I'm giving you three numbers now, and in a minute you're gonna give it back to me, versus 12 versus 15. It's the same, basically, it helps to visualize for an LLM. What GraphRag brings to the table is that we format the data differently, because once again, just like a human brain, we don't just remember chunks of text, we remember entities and their relationships. I remember my brothers and sisters, siblings. I remember different places I went. I remember different interests I have. And then I can create a knowledge graph, which is nodes connected by relationships. So for example, before I could write a text like this to ChatGPT and tell him I went to the beach with my sister yesterday and it was amazing, right? And then when I'm gonna tell about this trip again, he's gonna have to chunk the different text, maybe forget some pieces, put it in the text. So sometimes the text is too long and he's gonna forget. Some other times he hasn't extracted successfully all the good chunks of text from the information, and so it's gonna be partially incorrect. Now I had an extra step, which is I read the text before, I add a layer of name and entity recognition, right? And I understand that the text talk about Mehdi, about his sister, about the beach, which are all entities, right? Persons and places. And then I add the relationship. Mehdi and his sisters are siblings. Both Mehdi and his sisters have a relation that they have visited the beach, which is another entity. We add metadata to say they did that yesterday. And so now the LLM, when it goes back to my private knowledge base, instead of going to big chunks of text that can be incomplete, that can be incorrect, that can be too much to handle, um, he goes back to this knowledge graph that is interconnected between all the entities in the relationship. It could be in the context of a company before, after processing all the CVs I received. Now I have every candidate in a 3D space as nodes, and some of them have a relationship with Python. Great. So when I search for a Python developer, next time I do that, he's gonna just start from the node Python, and he's gonna follow very easily all the relationship, like who is connected to Python, this, and this guy. I'm gonna filter out everyone else, and now I only have to search already maybe 100 profile out of tens of thousands, right? And so it's a method to simplify even more, to compress the
Mm-hmm.
data very efficiently for the LLM to not be overwhelmed, to both reduce hallucination, enhance explainability,
Mm-hmm.
and also have enrich the data, because we can have now those different relationships, like did you learn Python, are you a professor that teach Python, are you a Python developer, or is Python part of your skills? It can all be stored in that metadata relationship.
And let's say that over time you discover new relationships. So can you go back and enrich your knowledge graph? So
Absolutely.
does this become like a dynamic tools that organizations can
Absolutely.
use as well as the businesses become more and more mature?
Yes, the really interesting thing is knowledge graphs have been around for decades, literally decades. This is not a novel concept. The novel concept is it used to be handcrafted, right? So
Mm-hmm.
before, if I wanted a knowledge graph about Mehdi and his sister going to the beach, I had to read the text, understand that Mehdi and his sister are persons, the beach is a location, and craft the graph myself, which is fine for static use cases. But let's be honest, the world isn't static and most use cases aren't. The very good thing now is that you can build a graph dynamically with an LLM
Mm.
very accurately from nothing, and scale it to millions and millions of nodes in just a few minutes, right? So that's the
Okay.
main. And suddenly we looked at it as, wait a second, obviously handcrafting it and prepare it by hand, it's going to be a lot of time. We could even just read just all the documents and shave all the unnecessary information and just prepare very short sentences for the LLMs. That would be good, right? But obviously, if you have had some clients with 20 millions of documents, yeah, we're not going to do that. Now the LLMs can do that for us, and that's the big advancement. That's why Microsoft, if you guys are curious about GraphRag, made an open source stack recently. It has more than 25,000 stars, so it's not just some fade or some. I mean, it has real life application, and a lot of people are looking at it. Me, the first, for the past 5 years, and it has tremendous potential, mostly in that area as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is kind of a very, very interesting, new version, like if we put in this way of RAG, because, for businesses, you keep working on the interpretability. So you're even increasing the interpretability even more. You are working on the hallucination. You can also make a system dynamic. So over time, your knowledge base, it does become more and more rich. But I think also the visual part that you mentioned is actually very appealing. I really like the example that you made about, for example, Python expert. So I'm an HR recruiter and I need to look for a Python expert. Having these visual elements that help me to really understand what can be the pool of potential candidates, it's actually extremely interesting. If I will ask then a following up question, the potentials, for example, in healthcare, hospital management, they are extremely interesting. If you think about doctors or nurses, how much they are overwhelmed by patients. So what do you think about it? What do you see that, healthcare, especially hospital management, can be an area where GraphRag can have interesting applications?
Okay, this is very funny. We didn't prepare this in advance, right? I haven't talked to you about this, but if you guys are curious about a RAG B2C that is currently public and accessible, you can go to medicom.fr. Unfortunately, it's in French, right? But That's one of the use case I chose specifically to tackle because I saw the benefit of it. And it is basically a rag that helps you find your doctors more efficiently with natural languages. So, for example, you can go and ask, find me a pediatrician in Paris that has good grades, that people mention is patient with toddlers and he has experience with toddlers and is open the Saturday, right? Find me a filter bar that can do all that. There is none, obviously. And so that is exactly what the RAG is doing. And one thing is, it's enabled by GraphRag. We could not have done this just with RAG simply because um, we're in healthcare, right? It's crucial that people find the right diagnostician, the right healthcare specialist for their needs. And one thing that differentiate RAG and GraphRag is that with GraphRag, just like an SQL database, you can have very specific requests that says, give me a doctor that is below this price and open this day, but not the other day, and have at least 4.5 or more in ratings and have at least 35 ratings, all that in one query, right? That's where regular RAG lacks a lot because RAG is just semantic analysis and comparison. So it's just going to find the chunks of text that are near the query you just made, right? But if I say, give me a doctor in Paris, it's going to find all the doctor sheets. Maybe some are in Paris, maybe some are not. But then there's cities that have Paris in the name, and he's going to also give me these ones. But then if I say, now I'm not interested about the city, I'm interested about the price, then he cannot. If I say, give me 30 euros or below, he's just going to focus on the 30, right? Because 30 and below, it means 29, 28, 27, 26. But this is not implemented inside the semantic of your query. And that's where GraphRag really shines, because most of my clients, is what they need, right? You can certainly imagine that any high stakes industries such as finances, healthcare, government, manufacturing, they want to enable a truly powerful search through the chatbot and be able to find a specialist not only because he knows Python or not, but maybe his pretension for the salary, maybe how many minutes he is from the office, maybe how many years of experience, just a simple use case, right? But if you go with regular RAG right away and you say, find me only people who have 4 years in experience and more, it's going to break because it's numerical and already either you code it statically, right? Excuse my English, I'm actually French. You either code it statically, but then you have to add every features by hand, and it's not truly a dynamic system. But then with GraphRag, again, you can do that because you can create what we call a cipher request, which is just like an SQL request, which is I interrogate my database and you give me back the results. Because again, GraphRag, knowledge graphs, they are stored in a database. So it's going to be just like your e-commerce database, just like your Salesforce, your CRM. You can suddenly have filters enabled on your data. They can be very rich and very diverse. And again, the good thing is it's generated automatically. So if you have 200 documents or 20 millions, maybe both aren't going to take the same times, but the 20 million ones, you may have to spend a few days, maybe a few weeks more, but not years and not decades.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Mehdi. So I'm conscious of time. So let's go with the last question, which is more about how the future, looks like, especially in the field of RAG. Because I mean, I think it's clear now after this, what everything Mehdi has shared, that really the direction in which the personalization of large language models is going is RAG. Fine tuning, it's something more niche, it's more complex, also very much more expensive. It has to really be tackled much more specific applications. What RAG can also have like a broader spectrum, a bigger, brief when it comes to, personalized analyzing your models. As Bailey was mentioning, it brings transparency, it aggregate knowledge, which also from a visual point of view can be very, very appealing. And also with the graph rag, it also helps to reduce hallucination. But let me ask this last question. So also the world of large language models is changing. How this foundation model works. An example is Gemini, which is the large language model for Google. The last version of Gemini is going into the direction of what are called long text large language models, which are really this new version of large language models that can really process much bigger sequences of text, which means that they're able to find more relations, but also to produce much more robust and cohesive output. Now, in this new direction in which the large language models are moving forwards, is RAG still relevant?
Yeah, that's a good question. Just to add a final example so people really understand RAG and fine tuning, right? Because fine tuning doesn't apply to the same use case at all. I have a fun little example I like. If I want my model to talk like Morgan Freeman, I'm going to fine tune it. If I
Yeah,
want my model to have accurate information about Morgan Freeman, I'm going to use RAG, right? And this is where the difference remains. Fine tuning is a lot more for style because now I'm in healthcare. I'm fine tuning for healthcare. Now it can understand acronyms like a doctor. Now it can not send text, but it can send reports because I fine-tuned it to return me reports doctor instead. So it's more about the style than the information. You cannot really efficiently add any information into a model by fine-tuning it, right? Because again, it already seen the whole internet. If you add emphasis on something and something else, the retrieval part is still going to be very shaky and very not accurate at all. But then, if I wanted to speak like Morgan Freeman and be very precise about the dates, about the movies he's been in, I'm going to both need to fine tune it to speak like Morgan Freeman speaks, the same phrasing, etc. But I also have a knowledge base which is about Morgan Freeman, which could be Wikipedia, which could be other information about Morgan Freeman. And yes, it's not a very good use case because most LLMs have whole Wikipedia and plus, and so it's public data, so it knows about it anyways. But I can still add some emphasis, and I can still have a knowledge base, so then it knows, oh yeah, Mr. Freeman, especially for freshness, right? I can have a database that it talks about Morgan Freeman, but what is he doing right now? Instead of, oh, sorry, my knowledge base is cut to August 2024. This is both differences, which I think, again, if people really just get that out of the call, I'm already more than happy, because from afar, it can be a bit confusing, right? RAG versus fine-tuning versus agent, etc. And to answer your question, which is a great question, the long context, even with the long context, we're still going to need RAG in the future. Why? Let me give you an example with Google, right? If in the 2000s, internet bandwidth was very limited. We could not just open 5 tabs and just look and, oh, I'm closing this, I'm going there, and I look a video instead. You had to be very strategic even, because it's going to take a long time, and we were a lot more careful, and it was taking a lot more time. Now we have a lot more bandwidth, just like models have a lot more context, but it's always going to be relevant, especially at the scales we are discussing right now, right? I'm not saying most people on a personal level need RAG all time, every time, right? A lot of the time, if I want to just keep track of what shows I've been watching and I want to make a little catalog, at one point a model gonna be able to remember all the shows I've seen ever, just in memory, right? 2 million context is huge. Maybe we are going towards 10 millions, 20 millions. There's also complexities. It's not as easy, right? We obviously lose inaccuracies and everything. Always beware of the benchmarks. But let's say in a perfect world, we have 10, 20 millions context, which is more of the all Harry Potter books, by the way, right? So it's a lot. Still, I don't have all the Harry Potter book. Maybe in my business, when I I'm accounting for the invoices, when I'm accounting for my CRM data with my e-commerce data, I have all the Harry Potter books time 1,000, time 10,000. How do I manage there? Especially because context stays in the RAM of your GPU. So again, a simple fact is if you want to host Gemini with a small context, a Gemma, for example, which is, I mean, even for Google, right? Hosting the 2 million contexts cost them tens of thousands of dollars a month, whereas a small model will cost in the low thousands. It is much more expensive to have in your short-term memory, right? From the metaphor we made, all the elements at once. So there's always going to be a goal towards making it more efficient, especially for large knowledge base, which is prevalent in the industrial and the B2B sphere.
Lovely. So thank you very much, Mehdi. And I hope it was now a little bit, you brought so many information and knowledge, about RAG, but also the evolution in which this general field of large language models is going. And also thanks for bringing examples, which varies a little bit, some information which is more technical. You made the example which are more related to the healthcare, but some example which is more, generalistic. So people, they can really, really understand how these techniques are applied and what are the differences between them. So I'm conscious of time, so I would say I think we can wrap up. If you do have any follow-up questions, please write in the chat. We're going to be happy to follow and answer to those questions. And just a quick reminder from my side. So this is the third of a series of webinars that we are going to host from now until July. The next webinar is the 23rd of May, so it's next Friday, and it's going to be with Dave Fusco, where we're going to discuss about agentic solution, so agent AI. David Fusco is professor at Penn University, so he's going to bring a very different perspective on the table. So you're going to receive soon, an invite for this new event, and I hope you're going to join us. And thank you very much for being here, and thank you very much, Mehdi, for all the knowledge that you've shared with us.
It was a pleasure being here and looking forward to the next one. Thank you, Mathilde.
Thank you.